Hey everybody, it's Ron, and I want to tell you a story about business and how that story changed everything. It's a hot afternoon in West Hollywood, California, July 9th, 1962. A small art gallery called the Ferris, one of the more adventurous contemporary spaces on the West Coast, has just opened a new show. A man wanders in off the street, not sure what he's looking at. He stops in front of a narrow shelf running the length of the wall. On it, 32 canvases, each one the same size, each one depicting a single can of Campbell's soup. A different flavor on each canvas: tomato, chicken noodle, cream of mushroom, all 32 lined up like a grocery store aisle in a fine art gallery with price tags attached. He thinks it's kind of cool, actually. He takes home the little poster from the front desk announcing the show. The woman next to him is less convinced. She's looking at the same shelf, the same cans, and she cannot figure out what any of this is supposed to mean. This is a gallery. Galleries show paintings of landscapes and portraits and abstractions, not soup. Down the street, the owner of a neighboring art space has already made his feelings clear. He stacked actual cans of Campbell's soup in his window with a handwritten sign. "The real thing," he wrote. "Available here, 29 cents a piece." And in the press, at least one critic has found his words. "The young artist," he wrote, "is either a soft-headed fool or a hard-headed charlatan." 32 canvases, $3 worth of grocery store imagery. A show that most of the art world either ignored or laughed at. But how do you take the visual language the art world looks down on, the language of supermarkets and advertising and mass production, and turn it into the thing that breaks the door open? How do you spend a decade being told your background disqualifies you and respond by making your background the entire point? And how did all of that come to a head when a largely unknown artist named Andy Warhol placed 32 soup can paintings on a shelf in a small West Hollywood gallery and set off a chain of events that would permanently change the relationship between art, branding, and commerce on July 9th, 1962? From Business Basics, I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the daily podcast where we explain the stories that changed business forever. Every date on the calendar has a story where business reshaped the world. Today, July 9th, that story takes us to 1962. 32 cans on a shelf. Andrew Warhol grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the son of Slavic immigrants in a working-class neighborhood where art meant the religious icons his mother painted on the walls of their house. He showed an early talent for drawing, studied commercial art at the Carnegie Institute of Technology in Pittsburgh, and moved to New York City in 1949 with a single suitcase and a portfolio under his arm. Within a few years, he was one of the most in-demand commercial illustrators in the city. His delicate, blotted line drawings of women's shoes ran regularly in Glamour and Vogue magazines. Tiffany & Company, the luxury jewelry and goods retailer, used his work. So did Dior, the French fashion house. By the mid-1950s, Andy Warhol, he had dropped the A from his last name early in his New York career, was earning more money than most fine artists ever would. And you know what? The fine art world didn't care at all. The hierarchy was clear and enforced. Commercial work was advertising. Advertising was selling. Selling was beneath art. The museums, the serious galleries, the critics who decided what mattered, none of them had an interest in a man whose greatest skill was making products look appealing to consumers. Warhol spent years trying to get that world to take him seriously, submitting work to galleries that turned him away, watching peers with fine art credentials move through doors that stayed closed to him. What he eventually understood, and what the soup cans were designed to demonstrate, was that the boundary the art world was defending was itself a kind of fiction. Consumer product imagery was already the most democratically shared visual experience in America. If that language was beneath art, then art was choosing irrelevance. Warhol didn't argue the point. He painted 32 soup cans and put them on a shelf. Irving Blum, co-owner of the Ferris Gallery, had seen the incomplete series leaning against the walls of Warhol's studio on the Upper East Side of Manhattan during a 1961 scouting trip and agreed to show them. Blum and his partner Walter Hopps made one key display decision. Rather than hanging the canvases on the wall, they placed all 32 on a narrow shelf running the length of the room. The installation looked like a supermarket aisle, and that was the point. The show ran through August 1962 and sold 6 of the 32 paintings before Blum made a decision that would turn out to be one of the shrewdest transactions in the history of American art. He called the 6 buyers back and asked them to return their paintings. He wanted to keep the series intact. In exchange, he offered refunds. Then he negotiated directly with Warhol to acquire all 32 canvases himself for $1,000. Paid in monthly installments of around $100 over the course of a year. The art world's verdict on the Ferris show had been largely dismissive, but something was shifting. Later that summer, Warhol secured a show at the Stable Gallery, an established contemporary art venue in New York City that showed work the serious art world was paying attention to. In November, his work appeared simultaneously at the Stable and at the Sidney Janis Gallery, another prominent New York space that represented some of the most important artists of the era. Both shows caused a sensation. In December, a symposium at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, one of the largest and most prestigious art institutions in the world, took up the question of whether pop art, the emerging movement that used consumer products and mass media imagery as its raw material, was legitimate. The symposium's conclusion was yes. 6 months after the Ferris show was ridiculed, the most important art institution in America had formally validated the movement that was launched there. The business consequences arrived quickly. Pop art didn't just change what galleries hung on their walls, it changed how the relationship between commercial imagery and the cultural value worked. For the first time, consumer brands weren't just the subject of art. They were the raw material of high culture. Campbell's Soup had been selling tomato soup since 1897. After 1962, the company's red and white can became one of the most recognizable visual symbols in the world. Not because of anything Campbell's did, but because Andy Warhol decided it was worth painting 32 times. Irving Blum eventually donated the 32 Campbell's soup can paintings to MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York City in 1996. Part gift, part purchase, with the museum paying $15 million for the collection. The man who bought them for $1,000 in installments received $15 million 34 years later. The paintings are considered priceless today. The transaction is worth sitting with as a pure business case. Blum saw something the market hadn't priced yet, consolidated ownership when others were walking away, and held it for 3 decades. The return on that $1,000 investment is essentially incalculable, and it started with 6 buyers agreeing to return paintings they had already purchased. The broader market consequences extended well beyond the art world. Pop art permanently changed how brands think about their visual identity. The idea that a consumer product could carry genuine cultural weight, that a soup can or a Coca-Cola bottle or a Brillo box could be elevated into an object of serious aesthetic consideration, gave companies a new kind of asset to manage. Brand imagery became something that could accrue cultural value independent of the product itself. That dynamic runs through the luxury goods industry, the streetwear market, and every limited edition product that trades at a premium based on cultural association rather than material value. Every sneaker collaboration, every artist-designed product line, every brand that has commissioned serious artists to interpret its visual identity is operating inside a framework that Andy Warhol helped build on a shelf in West Hollywood in 1962. Warhol himself said of Campbell's soup, "I used to drink it. I used to have the same lunch every day. The ordinariness was the point. Mass production, repetition, the deliberate erasure of the handmade, these weren't limitations he worked around. They were the argument he was making." The art world that spent years refusing to take him seriously because he came from advertising eventually put his work in every major museum on the planet. The commercial language they looked down on turned out to be the most consequential visual vocabulary of the 20th century. I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the podcast that finds the turning points behind the headlines. To hear more stories like this, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. And if you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to subscribe and leave a quick review. It helps more people find the story behind the business. And if you want to actually understand business better without the fluff or the buzzwords or the MBA language, start by visiting us at businessdailypodcast.com.